In the frozen underworld of New York City, silence isn't peace, it is a weapon. Stephen Vane, the infamous Deaf Don, ruled an empire of blood without ever hearing a scream. His world was absolute control, absolute isolation, and absolute silence. No one dined with him. No one touched him. To break his rules was to invite death. But one stormy night, a rule wasn't just broken. It was shattered by the only creature on earth brave enough to ignore his reputation. This is the harrowing, true-to-life story of a ruthless killer, a terrified mother on the run, and the baby girl who didn't know she was crawling into the lap of a monster. Watch until the end, because the betrayal revealed in the final act will leave you speechless. The dining room of the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue was less a place of nourishment and more a cathedral of ice. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, a glittering grid of electricity that Stephen Vane could see but not hear. He preferred it that way. Stefan sat at the head of a mahogany table, long enough to seat 20 men, yet it was set for one. He was 35, though the jagged scar running from his jawline to his collarbone, a souvenir from a car bomb that had taken his hearing 10 years ago, made him look older. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit, tailored in London, that fit his broad shoulders like armor. He didn't eat immediately. He placed his hand flat against the table's surface. He was listening. To Stefan, the world was a symphony of vibrations. He felt the rhythmic thrum-thrum of the HVAC system in the walls. He felt the heavy, hurried footsteps of his head of security, Nico pacing in the hallway 3 rooms away. He could tell by the vibration in the floorboards that the subway was passing deep beneath the city's bedrock. Tonight, however, there was a new vibration, a frantic, fluttering tremor coming from the kitchen. Stefan narrowed his eyes, his irises the color of cold steel. He picked up his silver spoon, the metal flashing in the dim chandelier light. He didn't turn his head. He waited. The heavy double doors to the kitchen swung open. Selina, the new maid, entered. She was young, perhaps 24, with terrified eyes and hair pulled back in a messy bun that suggested she hadn't slept in days. She carried a heavy silver tureen of lobster bisque. Her hands were shaking so badly the ladle rattled against the rim. Clink, clink, clink. Stefan couldn't hear the noise, but he saw the disruption in the air, the way the light caught the trembling silver. He watched her lips. They were moving in a silent prayer. "Please, don't wake up, please!" Stefan frowned. Who was she talking to? Selina approached the table, her knuckles white as she lowered the tureen. She began to ladle the soup into his bowl. She was terrified of him. Good. Fear made people predictable. Fear kept the coffee hot and the secrets buried. Then it happened. A vibration. Sharp. Sudden. A thud. It wasn't a dropped fork. It was something heavier hitting the Persian rug behind Selina. Stefan stopped breathing. His hand moved instantly to the Beretta holstered beneath his jacket. His eyes snapped to the space behind the maid. Selina froze the ladle, hovering in mid-air, dripping bisque onto the pristine white tablecloth. A red stain spreading like blood. She spun around, her face draining of all color. There, sitting on the $50,000 $1,000 antique rug, was a baby. She couldn't have been more than 11 months old. She was wearing a faded pink onesie that had seen better days, and she had a shock of unruly blonde curls. She had evidently escaped from the travel cot Selina had hidden in the pantry. The baby Daisy looked up at Stefan. In Stefan's world, people looked at him in two ways, with predatory aggression or trembling submission. Daisy did neither. She looked at him with pure, unadulterated curiosity. Selina let out a silent scream, throwing herself between the Don and her daughter. She fell to her knees, her forehead pressing against the floorboards. Stefan could feel the vibration of her begging. "Mercy, sir. Please," she escaped. "I had no one to watch her. I'll take her away. Please don't kill us." Stefan didn't move. His gaze was fixed not on the groveling mother, but on the child peeking out from behind Selina's hip. The rule was simple. No outside attachments. No families in the penthouse. Total isolation. Nico, his second-in-command, burst into the room, gun drawn. He had seen the commotion on the security monitors. 2 other guards, massive men, with necks like tree trunks, followed him in. They saw the maid on the floor. They saw the baby. Nico's face hardened. He raised his pistol, aiming it at Selina. In this world, a breach of security was a death sentence. A strange baby could be carrying a listening device, a biological agent, or simply be a distraction for an assassin. "Boss?" Nico signed rapidly, his hands sharp and aggressive. "She broke protocol. I'll handle it. I'll dispose of them." Stefan looked at Nico. Then he looked at the baby. Daisy had ignored her mother's sobbing. She had crawled out from behind the barrier of Selina's body. She was now crawling toward the table, toward the giant man in the chair. "No." Stefan signed back a single, sharp motion. Nico froze. "Boss, holster your weapon," Stefan signed. Daisy reached the leg of Stefan's chair. She pulled herself up, her tiny hands gripping the expensive fabric of his trousers. She wobbled and finding her balance on chubby legs. The room was frozen. The guards held their breath. Selina was weeping into the rug, waiting for the gunshot. Daisy looked up at Stefan. She reached out a hand, her fingers sticky with who knew what, and slapped his knee. Thump. Stefan felt it. A solid connection. He slowly turned his chair. He looked down. Daisy grinned, revealing 2 bottom teeth. She babbled something, the vibrations resonating in his shin bone. She wasn't afraid. She didn't know he was the butcher of Brooklyn. She didn't know he had ordered the deaths of 3 men that morning. To her, he was just a jungle gym. Stefan leaned forward. The movement was predatory, looming. Daisy didn't flinch. She reached up with both hands. "Up," she seemed to mouth. Stefan stared. For 10 years since the explosion that took his hearing and his parents, he had not touched another human being without the intent to harm or the exchange of money. Intimacy was a liability. Slowly, as if moving through water, Stefan extended his large, scarred hands. He wrapped them around the child's torso. She was impossibly small. Warm. He lifted her. Selina gasped, lifting her head, her eyes wide with horror, expecting him to throw the child. Instead, Stefan set Daisy on his lap. She immediately grabbed the lapel of his suit, crumpling the silk. She stared at the scar running down his neck. Then she did the unthinkable. She reached out and placed her palm flat against his throat. She could feel the hum of his breathing. Stefan stiffened. His heart hammered against his ribs, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. Not adrenaline, not rage. Something else. Daisy looked at his soup. She pointed. Stefan looked at the guards. He looked at Nico, who stood with his mouth slightly open. "Get out," Stefan said. His voice was rough, unused, graveled like grinding stones. He couldn't hear his own volume, so it came out as a low, thunderous growl. Nico blinked. Boss, the risk. Get out. Nico holstered his gun, signaled the men, and retreated, closing the heavy doors. Stefan looked at Selina, who was still trembling on the floor. Get up, he said, the words vibrating in his chest. Selina scrambled to her feet, wiping tears. Sir, I am so sorry. Does she eat lobster? Stefan asked, his speech slightly slurred but intelligible. Selina blinked, confused. What, the baby? Stefan gestured to the creature currently trying to eat his silk tie. Does she eat lobster? She likes broth, sir. Stefan picked up his silver spoon. He dipped it into the bisque. He blew on it gently, feeling the air reflect back against his lips to test the temperature. He held the spoon out to Daisy. She opened her mouth like a baby bird and swallowed it whole, smearing orange cream all over her face and his suit. Stefan Vane, the man who made the FBI nervous, felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Sit down, he ordered Selina, pointing to the chair at his right. You're going to tell me why you're really here, and don't lie. I can see a lie in the tension of a jaw before the words are even formed. Selina sat her hands shaking. I'm running, she whispered. I know, Stefan said, wiping Daisy's face with a napkin worth more than Selina's car. Who are you running from? Selina looked at the door, then back at Stefan. Her father. Stefan's eyes darkened. And who is he? Selina leaned in her voice, barely a breath, though Stefan read the name on her lips as clear as a billboard. Detective Marcus Harrigan. The spoon stopped halfway to Daisy's mouth. Stefan knew the name. Harrigan wasn't just a detective. He was the head of the anti-gang task force, the man who had vowed to put Stefan in the electric chair, the man who was currently leading a crusade against the Vane family. And this was his daughter. Stefan looked at the baby. She laughed, grabbing his thumb with a grip surprisingly strong for an infant. A slow, cold smile spread across Stefan's face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized the prey had walked into his den. Well then, Stefan said, feeding Daisy another spoonful. It seems we have a lot to discuss. But Stefan didn't know that the soup was the easy part. He didn't know that by the time the sun rose, the glass windows of his penthouse would be shattered, and he would be forced to make a choice that would cost him his empire or his soul. The vibration of a helicopter rotor blade hummed against the glass. Stefan felt it before he saw it. He grabbed Daisy, shoving the table away. Down! He roared at Selina. Crash! The window exploded inward in a shower of diamond-like shards. The world didn't bang, it shook. For Stefan, there was no sound of shattering glass, no roar of the helicopter rotors, no screaming wind. There was only a sudden, violent, concussive wave that punched the air from his lungs. 1 second he was wiping bisque from a baby's face. The next, the world had tilted on its axis. Stefan didn't think. Instinct honed by years of surviving assassination attempts in Palermo and Moscow took over. He curled his massive frame inward, turning his back to the window, creating a human shield around Daisy. Shards of reinforced glass, sharp as diamonds, rained down on his suit jacket. He felt them stinging his neck, slicing through the expensive wool. But he didn't flinch. He pressed Daisy's head against his chest, shielding her eyes, her ears, her life. He felt the vibration of her scream against his sternum. She was terrified. Stefan looked up. Through the jagged hole where his living room wall used to be, he saw the belly of a black helicopter banking away. A man in tactical gear was hanging out the side, a rifle strapped to his chest. Harrigan. This wasn't an arrest. This was an execution. Selina was screaming. Stefan couldn't hear it, but he saw her mouth stretched wide, her eyes bulging with hysteria. She was crawling towards them, her hands bloody from the glass on the carpet. Stefan grabbed her arm with his free hand, his grip bruising. He yanked her to her feet. "Move," he roared, the vibration tearing at his own throat. Nico was already moving. The head of security had overturned a heavy oak sideboard to create cover. He was firing blindly out into the night, the muzzle flashes of his Glock lighting up the room like a strobe light. Stefan saw Nico shout something, his neck veins bulging. "Get to the elevator!" Stefan shook his head. Too predictable. If they had a chopper, they had the lobby rigged. They had the elevators hacked. Stefan shifted Daisy to his left arm, holding her like a football. She was struggling her tiny legs, kicking his ribs. He grabbed Selina by the back of her maid's uniform and shoved her toward the kitchen. "The pantry," he commanded. Selina stumbled, looking back at the destruction of the penthouse. "We're trapped," she wailed, though Stefan only saw the shape of the words. "Go!" They burst into the kitchen. The stainless steel surfaces were gleaming, indifferent to the violence next door. Stefan kicked open the pantry door. It was stocked with enough dry goods to feed an army, but Stefan wasn't interested in food. He shoved a shelf of imported olive oil aside. Behind it was a panel that looked like the wall, but Stefan pressed his thumb against a hidden biometric scanner. Green light. The wall clicked and swung inward. It was a dumbwaiter shaft, but retrofitted. It was an emergency chute, a friction-controlled slide that dropped straight down to the sub-basement laundry facility, bypassing 40 floors of residential space. "Jump!" Stefan ordered Selina. She looked into the dark abyss. "Are you crazy?" Stefan didn't have time to argue. He felt the floor shudder a heavy thud. Boots on the floor. The tactical team had breached the penthouse. He didn't wait. He pushed Selina into the chute. Her silent scream vanished into the darkness. Stefan looked down at Daisy. Her face was streaked with tears and lobster bisque. She looked up at him, her blue eyes wide, reflecting the kitchen's fluorescent lights. She had stopped crying. She was watching him. "Hold on tight, little one," Stefan whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand. He wrapped his suit jacket around her head to protect her from friction, burns, clutched her to his chest and jumped. The slide was a terrifying, corkscrewing descent. Stefan used his boots to brake, fighting the gravity that wanted to smash them into the bottom. The friction burned through the soles of his Italian shoes. They hit the bottom a pile of industrial laundry bags with a bone-jarring thud. Stefan rolled, absorbing the impact, keeping Daisy elevated. He checked her immediately. She blinked, sneezed, and looked around the grey concrete room. Unharmed. Selina was groaning in the corner, disentangling herself from a pile of hotel towels. Stefan stood up, brushing lint from his ruined suit. He checked his watch. 2 minutes since the breach. "Up," he signaled to Selina. "We aren't safe yet." They ran through the labyrinth of the building's basement. Stefan knew every inch of this foundation. He had poured the concrete himself, or at least his construction firm had. They bypassed the security office, which Stefan saw was empty. Bad sign. Harrigan had cleared the building staff. They reached the parking garage. Stefan didn't go for the armored Mercedes or the Ferrari. Those were tracked. Those were coffins. He led them to a dusty corner covered in a tarp. He ripped it off, revealing a vintage 1970 Chevy Chevelle. Matte black. Plain. No GPS. No computer system to hack. Just raw horsepower. "Get in the back," Stefan ordered, throwing the keys to Nico, who had just burst through the stairwell door, bleeding from a graze on his cheek. Nico didn't ask questions. He slid into the driver's seat. Stefan jumped in the passenger side. Selina and Daisy huddled in the back. The engine roared to life. To Stefan, it felt like a beast waking up in the seat of his pants. "Where to, boss?" Nico signed with one hand on the wheel. "The ironworks," Stefan signed back. Nico slammed the car into gear. They peeled out of the garage, smashing through the wooden exit barrier, just as a black SUV screeched around the corner to block them. The SUV opened fire. Stefan watched the windshield spiderweb as bullets impacted the bulletproof glass. He didn't flinch. He watched the rearview mirror. Daisy was clapping her hands, delighted by the vibration of the car engine. Selina was huddled over her, praying. "Nico," Stefan said, his voice calm, flat. "Ram them." Nico grinned. The heavy steel of the American muscle car collided with the plastic bumper of the modern SUV. The force spun the attackers out, sending them crashing into a concrete pillar. They sped out into the rainy New York night, disappearing into the traffic of 57th Street. Stefan turned in his seat to look at the baby. She was asleep. The adrenaline crash. He reached back his hand, hovering over her head. He gently brushed a piece of glass out of her curls. Selina looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of terror and awe. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you save us?" Stefan read her lips in the rearview mirror. He turned back to the front, watching the rain smear the city lights into long streaks of neon. "Because," he said, his voice low, "he broke my window." But it was a lie. He saved them because for the first time in 10 years, someone had touched him without trembling. And Stefan Vane paid his debts. The ironworks was a defunct foundry in the Navy Yard, a crumbling relic of Brooklyn's industrial past. To the city, it was a tax write-off. To Stefan Vane, it was a fortress. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of rust and oil. The only light came from portable halogen lamps that cast long, jagged shadows against the brick walls. They had been there for 3 hours. Daisy was asleep in a makeshift crib made out of a drawer lined with Stefan's cashmere coat. Selina was sitting on a crate, holding a mug of instant coffee Nico had scavenged. Stefan stood by the metal shutters, peering out through a crack. He had taken off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing the intricate tattoos that covered his forearms, ink that told the story of his rise to power. He turned to Selina. The interrogation had to happen now. He pulled a metal chair opposite her and sat down. He tapped the table to get her attention. She jumped, spilling a little coffee. "Look at me," Stefan said. "Face the light so I can see your lips." Selina nodded, wiping her mouth. She looked exhausted, but the panic had settled into a grim resolve. "Detective Grant Harrigan." Stefan began pronouncing the name carefully. "The city's golden boy. The man on the news every night promising to clean up the streets. Why does he want a maid and a baby dead?" Selina took a deep breath. "I wasn't just his maid, Mr. Vane. I was his CI, his confidential informant." Stefan raised an eyebrow. "You were a snitch." "I was a waitress at a bar the Irish mob used," Selina said, speaking slowly and clearly, as she had been instructed. "Harrigan recruited me. He said he wanted to take them down. He was charming, protective. We started sleeping together." Stefan's face remained impassive. "Go on." "I got pregnant. When I told him, he changed. He panicked. He said he was married, that he had a career, a reputation. He wanted me to get rid of it. Selina glanced at the sleeping baby. I refused. I quit the bar. I disappeared. I had Daisy in a clinic in Jersey. That makes him a scumbag, Stefan said. It doesn't make him a murderer who attacks a Mafia don's penthouse with a helicopter. A scandal like that he could weather. He's got the union behind. Mind him. It's not just the affair, Selina said, her voice dropping. It's what I heard. The night I left, I went to his house to get my things. He was on the phone. He didn't know I was there. Stefan leaned forward. Who was he talking to? He called him Uncle, Selina said. He was talking about a shipment, not drugs, weapons, military grade. He said the shipment for the Vane territory is ready to be intercepted. We frame Stefan and the Russians take the contract. Stefan's eyes narrowed. The Russians. The Petrovic syndicate had been trying to encroach on his port territory for months. Harrigan isn't just a cop, Selina whispered. He's on the Petrovic's payroll. He's their inside man. He takes down their rivals using the law, and they pay him in blood money. If I come forward, if a DNA test proves Daisy is his, everything unravels. The timeline, the affair, the nights I heard him planning raids. I'm the loose end. Stefan sat back. The vibration of the truth settled in his bones. It made sense. The sudden raids on his warehouses last month, the tips the FBI seemed to get out of thin air. It wasn't bad luck. It was a setup. Harrigan was using the badge to clear the board for the Russians, and he was going to frame Stefan for it. He thinks you're dead, Stefan said, or he hopes you are. He won't stop, Selina said. He has the police, the task force, the surveillance. We can't run. I don't run, Stefan corrected her. Suddenly a small cry cut through the heavy atmosphere. Stefan felt it before he saw it. The air changed. He turned. Daisy was awake. She was standing up in the drawer, her little hands gripping the edge, face scrunching up. Selina moved to get up, but Stefan held up a hand. Sit. He stood and walked over to the drawer. Daisy saw him and stopped crying. She sniffled, reaching out. Stefan looked at his hands. They were hands that had strangled men. Hands that had pulled triggers. Could they hold this? He reached down and lifted her. She was heavier than she looked, dense with life. She rested her head immediately on his shoulder, her damp curls tickling his ear. He felt her heart beating against his chest. Thump, 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 thump. It was a rhythm, a language. Stefan walked around the factory floor, bouncing her gently. He felt a strange sensation in his chest, a cracking of the ice that had encased him for a decade. He walked past a polished sheet of metal. He saw his reflection, a scarred, terrifying giant, holding a tiny pink bundle. Daisy pulled back and looked at his face. She reached out and tapped his cheek. Tap, tap. Stefan paused. He looked at her, he took her hand, he placed her palm against his chest, right over his heart. Then he moved her hand to her own chest. You. Daisy giggled. She slapped his chest again. Nico watched from the shadows, his gun lowered, a look of disbelief on his face. He had served Stefan for 5 years. He had never seen the boss smile. Not a predatory smile, a real one. Stefan walked back to Selina. We aren't going to hide, Stefan stated. What are we going to do? Selina asked. Harrigan wants a war, Stefan signed to Nico, who translated aloud for Selina. He wants to frame me for weapons smuggling fine. We're going to give him a show. Stefan looked at the baby in his arms. But first, Stefan said, looking at Selina, She needs supplies, diapers, milk, and a toy. Selina blinked. A toy. She likes vibrations, Stefan said seriously. We need something that rattles. Boss, Nico interrupted, stepping into the light. He looked tense. He tapped his wrist. Phone. Stefan handed the baby to Selina and took the encrypted burner phone Nico offered. He read the text message on the screen. It was from an unknown number. I know you have them, Vane. Give me the girl, and you keep your territory. Refuse, and I release the audio of you ordering the hit on the councilman last year. Stefan stared at the screen. The councilman hit. That was a black op. Only 3 people knew about that. Himself, Nico, and his brother Julian. But Julian was dead. Stefan had buried him 2 years ago. Stefan looked at Nico. Nico's face was pale. Who knew about the councilman? Stefan signed, his movements sharp, angry. Nico shook his head. Just us, I swear. Stefan looked at the phone again. Whoever sent this knew everything. Harrigan, Nico signed. No. Stefan signed back. Harrigan is a sledgehammer. This is a scalpel. This is someone close. Stefan looked at Selina and the baby. The web was tighter than he thought. He had a traitor in his inner circle. He typed a reply. Come and get them. He tossed the phone to Nico. Burn it. We are leaving, Stefan announced. Where? Selina asked, clutching Daisy. Stefan put on his jacket. He checked the load in his Beretta. The Lion's Den, he said. We're going to the annual police gala. Selina's jaw dropped. The gala. That's where Harrigan will be. Half the force will be there. Exactly, Stefan said, a cold light returning to his eyes. He can't kill us on live television, and I have a date. He looked at Selina. You need a dress. And Daisy. Stefan paused, looking at the baby who was chewing on his thumb again. Daisy needs ear protection. It's going to get loud. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a kaleidoscope of excess. Crystal chandeliers vibrated with the collective hum of New York's elite politicians, judges, tech moguls, and the high-ranking officers of the NYPD. Stefan Vane adjusted his cufflinks. He stood at the top of the grand staircase, a monolith in a tuxedo cut from midnight blue silk. To his left stood Selina. She was unrecognizable. The terrified maid in the stained uniform was gone. In her place was a woman draped in a floor-length gown of silver velvet, her hair swept up to reveal a neck adorned with a diamond choker Stefan had pulled from his private vault. And in Selina's arms, dressed in a tiny, custom-fitted dress of white lace, was Daisy. Stefan couldn't hear the gasp that sucked the air out of the room, but he saw it. He saw the heads turn in a ripple effect, starting from the entrance and spreading to the stage. He saw the champagne flutes pause halfway to lips. He saw the sudden frantic flashing of camera bulbs, a strobe light effect that stung his eyes. The Deaf Don had arrived, and he had brought a family. Keep your head up, Stefan signed subtly near his waist. If you look down, you look guilty. If you look them in the eye, you own them. Selina swallowed hard, the vibration visible in her throat, and nodded. She stepped forward, descending the stairs. Stefan offered his arm. She took it. Her grip was iron tight. At the bottom of the stairs, the press was a wall of shouting mouths. Stefan read the lips easily. Mr. Vane, is it true you're under investigation? Who is the woman? Is that your child? Stefan offered a rare, thin smile to the cameras, a shark showing its teeth, and pushed through the crowd. The sea of bodies parted. People didn't want to touch Stefan Vane. There was a coldness radiating from him, a silent warning that the air around him was different. On the stage, Detective Marcus Harrigan was mid-speech. He was gripping the podium, his knuckles white. He had been talking about cleansing the city of organized crime, but his mouth had frozen mid-sentence. Stefan led Selina and Daisy to table 1, directly in front of the podium. The table reserved for the police commissioner. Nico pulled out a chair for Selina. Stefan sat down, crossing his legs, and stared directly up at Harrigan. Harrigan's eyes darted from Stefan to Selina, and then with a look of pure, unadulterated horror, to the baby in her lap. He recognized Daisy. Of course he did. He had ordered the hit on her. Stefan raised a glass of champagne in a silent toast. Checkmate. If Harrigan arrested them now, he would have to explain why the Maid was at the gala. If he caused a scene, the press would ask who the baby was. And Stefan had the DNA results, or at least the bluff of them, ready to go. Harrigan finished his speech abruptly, sweating under the stage lights. He stumbled off the stage and made a beeline for their table. "You have some nerve," Harrigan hissed as he leaned over Stefan's shoulder. Stefan didn't react. He couldn't hear the words, and he didn't turn to read them. He simply took a sip of champagne, ignoring the man entirely. It was the ultimate insult. "You are beneath my notice." Harrigan turned to Selina. His face was red, his veins bulging. "Selina, you need to come with me. Now. This man is a killer." Selina looked at the father of her child. Then she looked at the man who had shielded them from a grenade blast with his own body. "I'm not going anywhere, Marcus," she said, her voice steady. Harrigan reached out to grab her arm. Whack! Stefan's hand moved faster than the eye could follow. He caught Harrigan's wrist in a grip that could crush stone. He didn't stand up. He didn't even put down his glass. He just squeezed. Harrigan gasped, his knees buckling slightly from the pressure. Stefan turned his head slowly. He looked Harrigan in the eye and spoke, his voice low, guttural, and loud enough to carry to the nearby tables because he couldn't modulate the volume. "Don't touch my family." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the orchestra seemed to falter. The police commissioner, a portly man named O'Malley, hurried over, sensing a PR disaster. "Is there a problem here, Detective?" Stefan released Harrigan's wrist. He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a small silver flash drive. He slid it across the tablecloth toward the commissioner. "A gift," Stefan said, reading O'Malley's confused lips. "Evidence. The Russian shipment's coming into the Navy Yard tonight. You might want to ask your detective why his signature is on the customs manifests." It was a bluff. The drive contained nothing but encrypted gibberish. But Harrigan didn't know that, and the Russians who were watching from the shadows of the room would think Harrigan had been compromised. Harrigan's face went grey. He realized the trap. Stefan hadn't come here to kill him. He had come to make him a liability to his own partners. Suddenly, Daisy let out a squeal. She had grabbed a silver spoon and was banging it against the table. Clang! 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 Stefan felt the vibration in the table. He looked down. Daisy was grinning at him, drool on her chin. For a moment, in the middle of a den of wolves, the deaf Don laughed. It was a rusty barking sound. But it was real. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. Across the room, near the velvet curtains of the service entrance, Stefan saw a flash of light. Not a camera, a reflection, a scope. Stefan didn't wait. He kicked the table over, sending china and crystal crashing to the floor. "Down!" he roared. He grabbed Selina and Daisy, shoving them to the floor, just as a bullet tore through the space where his head had been embedding itself in the commissioner's chair. Pandemonium erupted. Screams, breaking glass, the stampede of hundreds of people. In the chaos, Stefan didn't rely on sound. He relied on the floor. He felt the heavy, rhythmic thudding of boots approaching through the erratic vibrations of the panicked crowd. Professional steps. Heavy. Fast. "Nico," Stefan signaled. "Back exit." They moved a phalanx of bodies moving through the screaming crowd. But as they burst through the kitchen doors into the service hallway, the air suddenly filled with thick white smoke. Gas. The service hallway was a white void. The tear gas was thick, acrid, and blinding. For a hearing man, this would be disorienting. For Stefan Vane, it was a tomb. He couldn't see. He couldn't hear. His primary senses were severed. He was floating in a nothingness of white smoke and pain. He held his breath, eyes stinging tears, streaming down his face. He reached out his hand, finding Selina's shoulder. He gripped it hard. "Stay close." He felt the vibration of gunfire, pop, 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 reverberating through the walls. Nico returning fire. Stefan dropped to a crouch, pulling Selina and Daisy down with him. The air was clearer near the floor. He pressed his palm flat against the linoleum tiles. Thump, thump, thump. Footsteps coming from ahead. 3 men, moving in formation. Stefan couldn't shoot what he couldn't see. He had to make them come to him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy gold lighter. He slid it across the floor hard. It hit the opposite wall with a clink he couldn't hear, but the vibration traveled back through the floor. The footsteps stopped. They were distracted. Stefan launched himself forward. He moved like a demon in the smoke. He tackled the first shape he saw, a man in tactical gear. Stefan didn't punch. He broke. He grabbed the man's windpipe and squeezed, feeling the cartilage snap. The second man fired. Stefan felt the muzzle blast heat on his cheek. He spun, using the falling body of the first man as a shield. He swept the second man's legs, feeling the bone give way under his boot. But the third man was smart. He didn't shoot. He waited. Stefan stood in the smoke chest, heaving. He reached out, trying to find a target. Nothing. Then he felt it. A tiny rhythmic tapping on his leg. Daisy. She was strapped to Selina's chest in a carrier, but her little leg was kicking Stefan's thigh. She wasn't kicking in panic. She was kicking in rhythm. Thump, 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 thump. And then a sharper vibration. Daisy screamed. Stefan felt the scream vibrate through his own body. She was reacting to something. Stefan spun around, following the direction of her face, trusting the instinct of the child. He threw a knife blindly into the smoke. A wet thud. A heavy vibration of a body hitting the floor. Stefan wiped his eyes, blinking through the tears. The smoke was beginning to clear as the ventilation fans kicked on. The third attacker lay on the ground, Stefan's knife embedded in his shoulder. He was writhing in pain. Stefan stepped over him. Beretta drawn. He kicked the mask off the man's face. It wasn't a Russian. It wasn't a cop. It was a man with a tattoo on his neck. A black serpent eating its own tail. Stefan froze. He knew that tattoo. It belonged to the Ouroboros, an elite mercenary unit that had been disbanded years ago. A unit that had worked exclusively for one man. Stefan grabbed the man by the collar, dragging him up. "Who sent you?" he roared, his voice cracking. The man grinned, blood staining his teeth. He looked at Stefan, then spat on his tuxedo. He moved his lips, slowly making sure Stefan could read them. "The dead don't stay buried, brother." Stefan's heart stopped. He looked at the man's hand. On his finger was a ring, a heavy gold signet ring with the Vane family crest. It was Julienne's ring, the ring Stefan had placed in his brother's casket 2 years ago. Nico appeared from the smoke, coughing, his arm bleeding. He saw the ring. He went pale. "Boss." Nico signed his hands, shaking. That's impossible. We saw the body. We buried him." Stefan stared at the ring. The message on the phone. The councilman hit. The intimate knowledge of his security. Julienne wasn't dead, or someone had dug him up. "We need to move," Selina choked out, clutching Daisy, who was wailing now. "The police will be here in seconds." Stefan ripped the ring off the mercenary's finger and shoved it into his pocket. "To the docks," Stefan commanded. "We're done hiding." They sprinted out the back exit into the rainy alleyway. The black Chevelle was gone, towed, or stolen. "Take the van." Nico pointed to a catering van. They piled in. Stefan took the wheel this time. He needed to feel the road. He needed to drive fast enough to outrun a ghost. As they sped onto the FDR drive, the city lights blurring into streaks of red and gold, Stefan looked at the ring in his hand. Julienne Vane, his older brother. The charismatic, cruel-talking face of the family, while Stefan had been the silent muscle. Julienne, who had tried to sell the family out to the cartels. Julienne, who Stefan had been forced to kill to save the empire. If Julienne was alive, this wasn't just a war. It was a reckoning. Daisy reached out from the back seat, her tiny hand grabbing Stefan's shoulder. She squeezed. Stefan looked in the rearview mirror. Selina was watching him, fear replaced by confusion. "Who is he?" she asked. "Who is the ghost?" Stefan met her eyes in the mirror. "The only man I ever loved," Stefan said, "and the only man I ever feared." Suddenly the van's radio, which had been silent, crackled to life. Stefan couldn't hear it, but he saw Selina's face go white. She stared at the radio, then at Stefan. "What?" Stefan demanded. "What is it?" Selina's lips trembled as she repeated the words coming through the static. "It's a voice," she whispered. He says, "Did you enjoy the soup, little brother? I made it myself." Stefan slammed on the brakes. The van skidded to a halt in the middle of the highway. The lobster bisque, the chef, the vibration in the kitchen before Selina even entered. Julienne hadn't just returned tonight. He had been in the penthouse. He had been in the kitchen. He had fed the baby. Stefan looked at Daisy. She was fine. Smiling. But the message was clear. I could have killed her. I could have killed you. I am watching. Stefan Vane. The man who feared nothing felt a shiver of true terror crawl up his spine. The monster wasn't at the gates. The monster was already in the house. The van abandoned the highway for the coast, rumbling down a gravel track that wound through the marshes of the Rockaways. The rain had turned into a nor'easter, battering the sides of the vehicle. To Stefan, the storm was a visual masterpiece. Lightning fractured the sky in jagged veins of white fire. The wind shook the chassis of the van, a constant turbulent vibration that traveled up through the steering wheel and into his arms. He drove them to the Breakwater, a derelict lighthouse and keeper's cottage on a jagged spit of land. It was the place where the Vane boys had spent their summers before the money. before the blood, before the silence. It was also the place where Stefan had supposedly killed Julienne. They burst into the cottage. It was cold, smelling of salt and rot. Nico immediately began boarding up the windows with scrap wood found in the corner. Stefan lit a kerosene lamp. The golden glow illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. He turned to Selina. She was shivering, clutching Daisy, who was wide awake and strangely silent, her big eyes darting around the shadows. "Tell me," Selina demanded, her voice trembling. "You said you killed him. How is he here?" Stefan sat heavily on a dust-sheeted sofa. He looked at his hands, the hands of a killer now shaking slightly. "I didn't finish it," Stefan signed, and Nico translated his voice grim. 2 years ago." Stefan continued, speaking the words himself, now his voice raspy and deep. "Julienne betrayed the family. He sold our roots to the cartels. The commission ordered his death. I was the executioner." Stefan closed his eyes. He could still feel the recoil of the gun from that night. "I brought him here. I put the gun to his chest. But he was my brother. He cried. He begged. He swore he would disappear. So I shot the wall. I put a ring on a corpse I bought from the morgue, burned the body, and told Julienne to run, to never come back." Selina stared at him. "You showed him mercy." "Mercy is a weakness," Stefan said, opening his eyes. They were hard as flint. "And tonight, I am paying for it." Suddenly the floorboards vibrated. Thump, thump, not thunder. Footsteps on the porch. Nico raised his gun. Stefan stood extinguishing the lamp. The door didn't burst open. Instead, a single envelope slid underneath it. Stefan walked over. He didn't pick it up immediately. He checked for wires. Nothing. He picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of the cottage, taken from the lighthouse tower above. Taken 5 minutes ago. And on the back, scrawled in red ink, "Come up, brother. Let's finish the conversation." "He's in the tower," Stefan signed. "It's a trap," Nico warned. "He has the high ground. He probably has a sniper rifle." "No," Stefan shook his head. "Julienne is a narcissist. He doesn't want to snipe me. He wants to look me in the eye when the lights go out. He wants me to hear, or try to hear, his victory." Stefan turned to Selina. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy iron key. "There is a storm cellar under the rug," he said. "Lock yourself in. Do not come out until I open it. If anyone else tries to open it, shoot through the door." He handed her a spare pistol. Selina took it. Her hands were steady now. The mother had overridden the maid. "Come back," she whispered. Stefan looked at Daisy. The baby reached out and grabbed his pinky finger. She squeezed it, a tiny pulse of life in a world of death. Stefan nodded once. Then he turned and walked out into the storm, heading for the black tower, looming against the lightning. The lighthouse stairs were a spiral of rusted iron. Stefan climbed, feeling the vibration of the wind howling against the stone walls. With every step, he felt the weight of the past. He reached the top. The lantern room. The glass was gone, blown out by years of storms. The wind whipped through the room, tearing at Stefan's clothes. In the center of the room, sitting on the rusted mechanism of the light, sat a man. He wore a white suit, impeccable despite the weather. His face was a mirror of Stefan's, but twisted. A long, jagged burn scar covered the left side of his face, the result of the fire Stefan had set to cover the fake death. Julian Vane. He smiled. He held a detonator in one hand and a microphone in the other. Around the room, Stefan saw massive speakers rigged up to car batteries. "Hello, brother," Julian shouted. Stefan saw the lips move. He saw the mockery. "You can't hear the wind, can you?" Julian yelled, his voice amplified by the speakers booming out over the ocean. "You can't hear the waves. It must be so peaceful." Stefan stepped forward, his gun lowered. He watched Julian's hands. "I gave you a life," Stefan said, his voice fighting the wind. "You gave me exile." Julian screamed, his face contorting. "You took the crown, you took the city, and you, a cripple, a broken toy. You think you are the Don, you are a placeholder." Julian pressed a button on the microphone stand. A high-pitched feedback whine erupted from the speakers. Stefan didn't hear the sound, but he felt it. The vibration was so intense, it hit him like a physical blow. It rattled his teeth. It scrambled the fluid in his inner ear, the one part of his hearing system that still had some function for balance. Stefan stumbled, vertigo slamming into him. The world spun. He fell to one knee. Julian laughed. "That's the thing about vibration, Stefan. You feel it more than anyone. Sound is just pressure, and I am going to crush you with it." Julian cranked the dial. The speakers throbbed. The floor shook. Stefan fell forward, retching, his vision blurring. He couldn't stand. He couldn't aim. Julian stood up, pulling a gold-plated Desert Eagle from his waistband. He walked over to where Stefan was crawling on the iron grate. "Look at you," Julian sneered, aiming the gun at Stefan's head. "Crawling like a baby. Speaking of which, I'm going to enjoy raising that girl. She needs a father who can hear her cry." Stefan looked up. He saw the gun barrel. He saw his brother's finger tightening on the trigger. He couldn't fight the vibration. He was paralyzed by the sonic assault. Crack! A gunshot rang out, but it didn't come from Julian's gun. Julian's shoulder exploded in a spray of red mist. He screamed, dropping the gun, spinning around. Stefan looked toward the stairs. Selina stood there, the wind whipping her gown. She held the pistol Stefan had given her with both hands. "She already has a father!" Selina screamed. Julian roared in rage, charging at Selina. The distraction was enough. The moment Julian moved away from the controls, the sound pressure dropped slightly. Stefan forced himself up. He didn't use his balance. He used his rage. He lunged, tackling Julian just as he reached Selina. The two brothers crashed through the rusted railing of the lantern deck, tumbling out into the empty air, hanging over the crashing waves 100 feet below. They slammed onto the narrow maintenance catwalk, outside the glass, the metal groaning under their combined weight. The wind was a hurricane here. Julian was faster fueled by cocaine and madness. He punched Stefan in the jaw, a blow that rattled Stefan's skull. Stefan fell back against the railing, the rusted metal biting into his spine. Julian was on top of him instantly, hands around Stefan's throat. "Die!" Julian screamed, his spittle flying into Stefan's face. "Just die, and let me take what is mine." Stefan couldn't breathe. His vision was tunneling. He saw Julien's face, the scar, the hatred. He felt the thumbs digging into his windpipe. Stefan reached out his hand, scrabbling on the wet metal grating. He felt something loose, a heavy iron bolt that had sheared off from the railing. He gripped it, but he didn't strike yet. He looked at Julian. He stopped struggling. He went perfectly still. Julian blinked, confused by the sudden lack of resistance. He loosened his grip for a fraction of a second. "Giving up, little brother." Stefan reached up with his free hand. He didn't strike Julian. He gently touched the scar on Julian's face. A gesture of brotherhood, a gesture of goodbye. Julien froze. "I loved you," Stefan whispered. The vibration traveled through his hand into Julien's cheek. Then Stefan's eyes went cold. "But she needs me." Stefan swung the iron bolt with every ounce of strength he had left. It connected with Julien's temple with a sickening crunch. Julien's eyes rolled back. His grip failed. He slumped sideways, dead weight. The wind caught him. Stefan watched as his brother's body slid through the gap in the broken railing. He watched him fall, a white ghost, tumbling into the black, churning ocean below. There was no splash. The sea simply swallowed him. Stefan lay on the catwalk, the rain washing the blood from his face. He gasped for air, his chest heaving. He felt a small vibration, then another. He turned his head. Daisy was crawling onto the catwalk. Selina was right behind her, terrified, grabbing the baby's dress to pull her back. Daisy saw Stefan. She smiled. She crawled right up to his face, ignoring the deadly drop inches away. She reached out and patted his wet cheek. Tap. Tap. Stefan closed his eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. He covered her tiny hand with his own massive bloodied one. The war was over. The silence had won. 6 months later. The dining room of the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue had been repaired. The glass was new bulletproof and 3 inches thick. Stefan Vane sat at the head of the mahogany table. But the table was no longer set for one. To his right sat Selina. She was wearing a simple, elegant dress, reading a law textbook. She wasn't a maid anymore. She was the head of the Vane Foundation, managing the legitimate side of the business. And in a high chair at the foot of the table sat Daisy. She was a toddler, now holding a spoon with surprising dexterity. Stefan wasn't eating. He was watching them. Nico walked in carrying a tablet. He signed "Boss, the shipment from Palermo is secure," and Harrigan, the internal affairs investigation found the evidence in his locker. "He's looking at 20 years. Stefan nodded. "Good." He looked back at the table. Daisy banged her spoon on the tray. Bang. Bang. She looked at Stefan, waiting. Stefan picked up his spoon. He banged it on the table. Bang. Bang. Daisy squealed with laughter. She did it again. Stefan repeated it. It was a conversation, a language of rhythm and vibration that only they fully understood. Selina looked up from her book and smiled. She reached out and placed her hand over Stefan's free hand on the table. Stefan looked at the view of the city. It was still silent. It was still cold. But inside the glass it was warm. For the first time in his life, the deaf Don didn't mind the silence, because for the first time, he wasn't dining alone. And that is the story of Stefan Vane, the man who conquered the underworld in silence, only to be saved by the loudest noise of all, a baby's cry. What started as a breach of protocol became a testament to the fact that even monsters can be redeemed by innocence. This story makes us ask a difficult question. If you were in Stefan's shoes, a man with everything to lose, would you have saved the daughter of your enemy? Or would you have let the rules of the underworld take their course? Let me know your answer in the comments below. If you enjoyed this twist-filled saga of the deaf Mafia boss, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a story. We have a dark romance involving a blind pianist and a cartel leader coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching.